Liviu Rebreanu is the first modern Romanian novelist and one of the most important Romanian writers. His complex writings address some of the main social issues of the first decades of the 20th century. Liviu Rebreanu was born in 1885 in Târdișoara, a village in Bistrița-Năsăud County in Transylvania. He was the first of the 14 children of the school teacher Vasile Rebreanu and of Ludovica Diuganu. His parents later became models for the members of the Herdela family, characters from his first novel Yeon. In 1889, his family moved to Maieru, the place of Rebreanu's childhood that he came to depict in many of his writings. After attending high school in Bistrița, Rebreanu enrolled at the military school at Sopron, Hungary, and then to the Ludovica Military Academy in Budapest. He wished to study medicine, but the tuition fees were prohibitive and his family couldn't afford them. After graduation, he worked as an officer in Gyula in the Austro-Hungarian army. It was during this time spent in Budapest and Gyula that Rebreanu became interested in literature and foreign languages, starting to write in Hungarian. After only 2 years, in 1908, he came into conflict with the authorities, resigned from the army, and returned to Transylvania, to Prislop, the village where his family had settled. This was an opportunity for him to better observe the society of rural Transylvania, its realities and inner conflicts, that he later used in some of his short stories and his first novel, Yeon. About the same time, Rebreanu published his first short story, Codrea, Voice of the Heart. Next year, in 1909, Rebreanu illegally crossed the mountains in Romania and arrived in Bucharest with a view to working as journalist. He wrote and did several translations for Romanian papers and tried to settle in the capital. In 1910, the Austro-Hungarian authorities found him guilty of publishing some subversive texts. He was arrested, extradited, and forced to spend 6 months in prison in Gyula. But after his release, he returned to Bucharest in the fall of the same year. He was noticed by the literary critic Mihail Dragomirescu, who became his staunch supporter and publishing Rebreanu's other short stories. Unfortunately, there was a hard period for Rebreanu, who had to work for several journals, and the following year he accepted to move to Craiova as a literary advisor to the National Theatre. It was here that he met his future wife, the actress Ștefana Fani Rădulescu, who received a permanent position at the National Theatre in Bucharest, so that they had to move back to the capital in 1912, when Rebreanu's first book, a volume of short stories, novellas, was published under the title Frământări, Worries. Until Romania entered World War I in 1916, Rebreanu had been working for the journal Adevărul, The Truth, and had written other short stories published in different versions and editions under the following titles: The Hooligans and Confession in 1916, Resentfulness in 1919, and The Luck in 1921. During the war, Bucharest was occupied by German soldiers, and Rebreanu, as an Austro-Hungarian citizen, was questioned by the new authorities. He had to run away to Moldavia, and after several adventures, he finally arrived in Iași, the new Romanian capital. After the war, he returned to Bucharest and rewrote his first novel, Yeon. As he came to confess later, Rebreanu started the novel in 1910, and by 1930 he had already finished a tentative version. The novel Yeon, which was published in its definitive version in 1920, represents the first modern novel in Romanian literature. It is a complex novel, describing in a very realistic way the rural Transylvanian society at the turn of the 20th century. That was a patriarchal society, full of different problems, class struggle, ethnical conflicts, gender issues, and so on. The main narrative plot focuses on a poor peasant, Yeon, born in a very poor family. He loves to work the land, and his obsession is to earn enough money to buy some land. This is not the obsession of a miser man, but the struggle of an honest and hard-working man to achieve respectability in his community. Because one's social status in that society is connected to one's fortune. Despite the fact that he is a clever man and a hard worker, he is unable to purchase land as a result of his own efforts, because whatever he earns is never enough. Practically, he is trapped in his condition. Without any education, without the possibility to earn enough money, he seems condemned to misery and insignificance. And the only opportunity to gain the land he desires is to seduce Anna, the daughter of a wealthy farmer, Vasile Baciu. Despite his love for Florica, the beautiful girl of a poor widow, the love for the land is more powerful. He plans to make love to Anna and get her pregnant in order to force his father to allow her to marry him and thus give him a portion of his land. The plan succeeds. Anna falls in love with him, and after a series of conflicts between him and Anna's father, he finally marries Anna, and her father makes Yeon a man of property. There is a very powerful scene when Yeon kneels and kisses the land, thereby revealing his true love. Rebreanu confessed that the scene was real. This was the starting point of the entire plot. After a short while, Yeon realizes that he is not interested in Anna and her sickly baby anymore. Therefore, after he has beaten her, he sends her and the child back to her father. Rejected by her father and dishonored by her husband, Anna commits suicide, and shortly thereafter her baby dies too. Rebreanu thus emphasized the hard life and the precarious condition of women in a patriarchal society where a woman's sole function is to give birth and to work for her family. She has no freedom of action and lacks an independent voice. After this tragedy, Yeon tries to return to Florica, who was already married to George. The end of the story is tragic because George discovers Yeon's intentions, stalks and finally kills him. Rebreanu also portrays the family of the village schoolteacher Herdele. Full of autobiographic representations, this is another part of the rural society wherein countryside intellectuals try to fulfill the role of social negotiators. The novel is also important because it constitutes an important ethnographic document, describing the most important rituals and habits of a typically rural community, from baptisms through weddings to funerals. Rebreanu's next important novel is The Forest of the Hanged, published in 1922. The plot has a tragic autobiographic source. The author's brother, Emil, an officer in the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I, was sentenced to death and executed for trying to desert the army. In Rebreanu's novel, the main character, Apostol Bologa, the son of a Romanian lawyer from Transylvania, is also an Austro-Hungarian officer and has to fight for the empire. At the start, he is a very loyal combatant, but when he has to move on the Romanian front and fight against Romanian soldiers, the national conscience awakens in him, and he plans to desert. he is torn between his military honor and his national identity. Finally, after a tormented period of time, Bologa decides to desert the imperial army and pass the front line. He is captured and sentenced to death for treason. The novel addresses some hard questions regarding the absurdity of war, the problematic nature of any empire, national and individual identity, human nature, and the psychological distress of a modern dramatic character caught in a trap of history. Another relevant novel is Rebreanu's The Uprising, published in 1932. If Yeon and The Forest of the Hanged had a powerful autobiographic dimension, this novel focuses on the peasants' 1907 uprising that did not occur in Transylvania but in the Romanian kingdom. The tragic events took place a few years before Rebreanu's arrival to Romania. Not being a direct witness, he had to undertake significant research to understand the causes and the outcome of the uprising. Rebreanu succeeds in recreating the atmosphere, the stages of the crisis, and to clarify the position adopted by different social classes in relation to the main problem of the rural world, the feudal relations between peasants who had no land and the gentry and the greedy tenants who had every interest to maintain the status quo. The role of witness is attributed by Rebreanu to young Titu Herdelea, the son of the school teacher from the novel Yeon, who, like Rebreanu himself, came to Bucharest from Transylvania to become journalist. He meets Grigore Iuga, the son of a wealthy landlord, who invites him to his family estate. It is there that Titu Herdelea discovers the real life and the struggle of the peasants. If Grigore Iuga is a reformist, his father is a conservative landlord who can't accept any change. He is incapable of understanding the peasants' requests because he treats them like children. Rebreanu builds an outstanding collective character, the peasant's polyphonic voice. The reader senses the accumulation of tension by means of action and dialogue, up to the climax. The peasants revolt against their masters, burn their mansions, kill those who oppose them, and chase away the rest of them. The end of the adventure is dramatic. The government sends the army to restore the situation and to punish the culprits. Another important writing of Liviu Rebreanu is Chulandra, a story of a strange case of erotic obsession. Puiu Faranga is the son of a landlord who falls in love with a peasant girl on the obsessive rhythm of a melody and dance named chulandra. In a fit of jealousy, he murders his wife and his father has him certified and confined. Even though at first he seems to simulate illness, his obsession grows and he ends up by losing his mind for real. The novel combines a tradition of naturalism addressing the problem of genetic inheritance and makes full use of the modern Freudian psychoanalysis. Adam and Eve is a parabolic novel on the metempsychosis theme. The main character, Toma Novak, founds his feminine double and thus seeks to restore the primordial couple. The myth of androgyny is transparent here. He lives 7 lives in different eras, spanning from ancient India and the Egyptian Empire to the French Revolution and finally 20th century Bucharest. Other noteworthy novels are The Gorilla, Embers, and the final novel named Both. Also, Rebreanu is the author of several dramatic plays with different styles and different degrees of importance. The actuality of Rebreanu's writings consists in his addressing important themes, such as poverty, inequality, women's condition in a patriarchal society, the nature of war, and, last but not least, the crisis of conscience that it entails.